The top two topics couples fight about are sex and money. They are two very vulnerable topics that can easily erupt into conflict, and they are topics that most people get very little guidance on from their parents. That's why many couples don't even talk about their money and often operate separately with few, if any, future goals. Coming up, we'll be talking with Andrew Van Alstyne on the importance of talking about finances in a relationship. Hang on.
Take a girl and a guy, and they fall madly in love and form a family. Sprinkle in some counseling degrees and a doctorate, a dream of transforming relationships as we know it. And 20 years later, we give you power couple Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. And this is their podcast, Couples Synergy.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Couple Synergy with Dr. Ray and Jean. I am Dr. Ray.
And I'm Jean, and this is our podcast about love, marriage, and relationships.
Check us out online at couplesynergy.com or on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Couple Synergy. And please subscribe to our podcast, leave us a review, or send us any suggestions on topics you'd like to hear more about. Keep in mind that this podcast is broadcasted live every Tuesday. And join us with a discussion or questions just to say hi. And now on a Couple Synergy, an in-depth look at love, marriage, and relationships, where we bring you our experience helping thousands of couples transform their relationships for over 25 years.
Everyone says you should work on your relationship, but nobody teaches us how. So we've created this podcast to teach people what they can do to create the relationship they've always dreamed of
with the partner they fell in love with. On today's episode, we welcome Andrew Van Alstyne, who, driven by a passion for preserving family legacies, entered wealth management with a commitment to comprehensive financial care. As a financial advisor, he believes in the importance of couples talking about their finances together. Thank you so much, Andrew, for being on our podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, it's a very important conversation. As you mentioned earlier, the top two topics that couples fight about are money and finances, or sex and finances, I should say, because it is very vulnerable and most couples don't get any guidance in either.
That's absolutely true. And, I think society as a whole in this country, we do a poor job at equipping people with the tools necessary to handle financial matters. So by the time we get to adulthood, whether we've been extremely successful or struggling to make ends meet, we feel like we're adrift at sea and not really knowing where we are in relation to where we want to be. And it's that vulnerability that we have. Even most couples that I meet, they are very open and transparent with one another, but money is one of those things that they don't necessarily understand what the other spouse or other member of the couple is seeing in their perspective on financial matters, even though a lot of it is commingled throughout their life.
Are you seeing trends in generations? Like, is there a trend in the boomer generation or in the generation X and millennials?
Absolutely. I think boomers, and I think a lot of this has to go also with stage in life. They are wanting to know that they'll be okay to ride off into the sunset and enjoy the retirement that they always envisioned that they would. There tends to be a little bit more stress in retirement planning, both with the intensity that they want to attack it, as well as just the general preparedness. Younger generations, from what I'm seeing, first off, I'm seeing a lot more female involvement. I'm seeing that whether it's a married couple or single females, you're seeing a lot more women take more of the first chair in financial conversations. You're seeing even men that may be the main breadwinner wanting to get their spouse involved in financial matters a little bit more. But I'm also seeing on a much more larger scale, whether newlyweds, young couples, married for, call it 10 years or less. Yes, they have long-term envisions as far as legacy planning, as far as retirement planning, but they're also focused on enjoying life now. They want to enjoy the fruits of their labor while they're in the throes of it. which is a little bit shifter from some of the dynamics that go on with more senior generations.
Are there changes in finances now because older generations are living longer? What I mean is, like, millennial generations, are they now having to take care of, their parents and maybe grandparents? And is that changing, how couples should look at finances?
It can. It can, especially for the years that you see couples kind of being the sandwich generation. That can definitely be more taxing on their finances. What I see, though, is I see in younger couples, they are expressing fears in the loss of purchasing power. They want to enjoy the money while it has the maximum buying power in the now. They're also looking to create a lifestyle where work is optional at a much younger age, meaning that they are placing less emphasis from the conversations I'm having in necessarily looking at retirement as being crossing this finish line into the next stage in life. They're willing to work longer in something that they enjoy doing, something that's optional, to continue to have income streams. I think that that's the biggest shift there. I do see what you're saying, though, as far as the strain of having their older generations. But with that, retirement in general is a relatively new phenomenon for mankind. Up until not even 150 years ago, retirement was the day that we stopped living. So to plan for something that is relatively still novel, I think a lot of people are still wrapping their head around what it means to them and their family.
What should a couple be thinking about when it comes to retirement, especially since it's a new concept?
Mm-hmm. I think that they need to have conversations with one another, as well as anybody that they use to help plan their financial lives. As far as what they envision, as I mentioned, younger couples that I'm talking to now, they either don't see an off ramp to stop working and just solely focus on a withdrawal strategy in retirement, or they're of the mindset that they don't want to stop working. And that's fine. If you enjoy what you're doing, I don't think there's necessarily a need to stop. But have that conversation with your spouse as far as what it looks like as you're getting up there in age. What do you plan on doing together? What do you plan on enjoying with each other? Depending on how much net worth you amass, what are you looking to do in your later years as far as passing on your values to next generation? Not necessarily the financial assets, because that's merely a tool, but what you're actually looking to do as far as sitting down, having conversations. Is it family vacations that are going to double as a family retreat where you're having open and honest discussions as far as what the family stands for and how they're going to continue embracing those values in their life? But a lot of it is having those open discussions so that even if you have a disagreement, you can focus on what you agree on and help to accelerate those values while you work in better aligning your other financial goals along the way.
One thing we've seen with couples in that kind of that age bracket of later 50s and up is they struggled really hard to put enough money away for their kids to go to college, and they took on their kids' student loan debt, and now they're in a bind because they're trying to wind down and maybe retire, but they've put all the resources in their kids, and then these kids are going to college. They're debt free and they're getting $100,000 jobs right out of college. And so they can think very differently because the burden now is on the generation before. And, we see a lot of people in that position. What can they do if they're looking at within a 10-year frame and they don't really have much prepared for retirement?
So that's where it gets. Ideally, what I would want to do in a perfect world is have those conversations earlier on when we're talking about college planning for children. But making sure that there's an understanding between those generations as far as the purpose of going to college, and this is the values part, the values that the parents are looking for the kids to get by going to college, not only the intellectual value, but the societal value. But then the children at that point should, if it's communicated correctly, have an understanding and an appreciation where the finances that are, again, that tool at that point can be utilized to help the family members that may be lagging a little bit on financial resources in that moment, which from the sounds of it, if you're talking about the parents that depleted what they're trying to save, it may be the children that have to help contribute to their coffers and feed into that. And there's various tools and mechanisms that can be pulled to do that in a responsible fashion for all parties. But it's something where if you're talking about the transfer of the values from the intellectual and societal standpoint of going to college, that can be more than worth the wait in the finances, so long as the values are understood by all parties so that they can support one another in other means later in life.
So you're really talking about multi-generational family vision.
Correct. And when you're looking at a multi-generational vision, it allows for the resources of one generation to be used to further fuel the next. But at the same time, the younger generation can, if they're in a position to be able to, almost reimburse that senior generation for the financial resources that were given to help accelerate their career, accelerate their profession, increase the family intellect and education and knowledge, increase the family network. There's a lot of other forms of capital that the family can be building while transferring the finances between generations.
Let's talk a little bit about your personal story. What interested you in going into this field?
So I come from a family that were very much of the servitude mentality. My mother was a teacher, first computer programmer, then became a teacher. My father was a New York City Police Department officer. Both of them came from working class families that were living the American dream. They worked hard. They saved more than they spent. They were able to enjoy comfortable retirements, but towards the end of their life, when their health started to deteriorate, they saw a lot of those financial assets get sucked up through medical expenses because they didn't necessarily do the proper planning and estate planning and wealth transfer planning prior to that need arising. Fortunately, my parents were both equipped with all those other forms of capital that I've been alluding to, where they were already in a very good position. But I've also seen other families that either they've been friends, close acquaintances, neighbors of mine, who didn't necessarily have those transfers of capital. And I've seen financial resources squandered. There's a saying in just about every single culture, and the American version is shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. You have one generation that's able to amass wealth. The next generation, the second generation, can kind of live on it. And by the third generation, all that wealth is squandered because there was nothing that was able to continue that forward. So I feel that I was very fortunate in my positioning and that we had other forms of capital that we transferred to allow us to continue to build the financial capital, even though that financial capital that they had in their bucket as my grandparents wasn't there. So that's really what fueled me, is that I want to try to help other people retain their legacy, whatever that may be, whether that is the transferring of finances, whether that is giving to philanthropic ventures so that society as a whole can be better positioned within their passions and their missions. But it's wanting to better equip people with the tools and resources necessary to be able to utilize money as a true tool and a piece of equipment, rather than looking at that as amassing the financial capital as the end game, because it really shouldn't be. It's just a form of bartering. It's a form of obtaining what you want out of life. And as long as you keep that in perspective, I think that that's the critical piece. And I just look to try to help people position their financial resources to put those things in alignment.
A lot of times we kind of do the patterns that we do, right? And so, when you look at the economy or you look at winning the lottery or whatever the things are that might be a big a big impact on a stagnant financial picture, where you have this budget, you work your budget, but all of a sudden this costs more, or I have this influx of money. And, I heard the saying that if you took all the money in the world and evenly dispersed it, it wouldn't be long before the wealthy become wealthy again and the poor people become poor again. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that there's something to be said for that. And a lot of that does have to go back to what I've been mentioning, is that the wealthy become wealthy because they aren't inherently good at embracing a value system. That they're able to pick a mission that aligns all of their values into one, and they keep using that as a focal point in everything that they do in life. Those that squander wealth, those that are never able to achieve it, they're ones that never really clearly define their mission statement, what their why is, what they stand for. And they may be great workers, they may have great grit, but they're never able to operate with a level of intensity towards one single passion in the way that the wealthy do. And I think that if people took the time out of their day, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a long exercise, just to sit down, write out what's important for them, and find a way to embrace that. There's a reason why, if you go back into the 80s, why every publicly traded company, was harping on having mission statements and core values. It gave everyone in that organization a sense of purpose. That's kind of fallen by the wayside and kind of has become old hat at this point in corporate America for a lot of the newer tech companies. But it still resonates on a family level. If you can decipher what your why is, the money will come. The money will focus and further fuel those passions and those goals that you have, rather than just using it as a tool of release for stress, for floating by. It makes everything else background noise and allows you to really focus on what drives you forward.
We've been working with a couple recently, and that couple has just been living paycheck to paycheck, really. They're empty nesters, kids are out of the house, and they don't really, they've said to us, why would we go and meet with a financial planner? We don't really have any money, to talk about with a financial planner. So I was wondering if you can kind of talk about that, because I think that's a very common thought process for people, is that if I don't have any money, why should I go meet with a financial planner?
It's something that I hear frequently as well. And the one thing that I would say to that is, a lot of people look at financial planners from all the negative aspects that media has portrayed, whether it's, Wall Street or the Wolf of Wall Street, where you see wealth managers that are wheeling and dealing, and they're brokers that are getting rich off of their clients' assets. What a true financial planner is, what a fiduciary can do to someone who may not necessarily have a ton of assets for managing, is help them get on a budget that works for them and their lifestyle, and try to look for increased efficiencies within that. Try to talk about the psychology of money with them, behavioral finance with them, and get them to understand, again, their mission statement, their why, more clearly hash out their values so that they can work intentionally towards achieving goals. And it's something where, while they may not have many assets right now, they can help provide a more clearer understanding of what they're working towards, so that they have more peace in their life, which then almost snowballs into them willing to work harder towards achieving those goals. And it gains momentum heading in that direction. So what a financial planner can do for those individuals, it is really bring peace. It may not necessarily bring all the answers, but it will bring them peace that what they're doing is the right thing, and bring clarity to it.
You mentioned the word fiduciary. Can you talk a little bit about that, for our audience, and explain what it is?
Absolutely. So fiduciaries were originally intended to manage trusts, and what they were to do is to operate in the trust's best interests, if the beneficiary was not in a position to be able to make decisions on that asset, whether it's a tangible or financial asset on their own. The fiduciary standard as it stands today is doing what is prudent for the actual investor, for the actual client, which means that I'm not operating and putting together portfolios and then just rubber stamping every single client into every single portfolio or financial plan. Everything that I do is custom designed, custom built for the client, what's in alignment with their goals, their objectives on the investment side, what's comfortable for their risk tolerance. How, if they are behind in saving and they are looking to accelerate their financial growth through investing, how close can I hold their hand to the fire before they start screaming, ow, in tumultuous economic times? Sometimes it may mean that I need to explain why we're getting a little bit closer than comfort for them, but it's something where I handle their investments, handle their finances as if they were my own. My clients are my boss, rather than having a broker dealer that's saying we need to try to position XYZ fund or stock or investment portfolio to our clients. There's only a suitability standard for those type of fund managers.
Can you explain how financial advisors bill their clients? How do they make money?
Yeah,
obviously it's a business, right?
Yes, it is. And that's one of the things that I think comes up mostly, and I alluded to a little bit. And there's no one right answer for every single person, every single household. Being a fiduciary, we don't charge fees or commissions on products, so it's not something that we do just off of trading or what product we're selling our clients. It is fee based, so I get paid by my clients. And again, there's multiple arrangements even within that standard. There can be a flat monetary fee that is paid for more of the financial planning component if there aren't a lot of assets under management. For families that I deal with that are on the higher net worth side, we can incorporate investment and financial planning all into a fee based on the assets that they have for investing. There's other financial advisors that I know that do monthly subscription, one-time annual planning. And again, all of it can vary as far as the expenses with the scope of work that's being completed for the client as well. Some people will only focus on financial planning. Some people don't want to touch, some financial planners don't want to touch investments at all. Others rather have nothing to do with the day-to-day finances and only want to handle investments. Those like me, if there's anything that money touches or anything that comes up with a monetary conversation in your life, I am happy to be a part of that for my clients. I am honored when they bring me into all of those conversations, because it's nothing in finances is linear. It's a four-dimensional movement of pieces where anything that money touches, when you start to look at one and move money around in one component, it'll shift everything with it. So you just need to make sure that they all stay working. Some people are fine with managing one aspect of that dynamic themselves, which is why they're okay with only getting someone who's helping them with budgeting or someone who's only helping them with investing. They may have the time or intellectual resources to handle the other matters. I really just look to lift all of that burden off of my clients' plates.
There's I guess, a very popular financial advisor that has been featured in TV and podcasts and everything. And he recommends don't go with a financial advisor that charges you a percentage. Is that something that you would also recommend?
No, not necessarily. This is where, for me, money, religion, and politics, those are the three things that are kind of not widely talked about in society. But I think that there's a reason for that they're somewhat interrelated as far as being philosophical values. And I think that money management is aligned with that as well. I don't think that there's any wrong way for every single person. I think that you need to find someone who can help you achieve your goals in life that works with your philosophies. For me, the reason why I am fee based and charge a percentage to that, I'm beholden to my clients. They are my bosses. They are the ones that tell me what to do. And I want to make sure that I'm working on their behalf and not beholden to any other entity or party to making sure that they reach the success that they look in life. Um, knowing, or I believe I know who you're talking about and where they're coming from, where there are ones that charge excessive amounts. My firm, myself, we cap our fees at 0.95%. That's the most we charge any client. There are advisors out there that'll charge 2.5%, 3% for what they're managing. At that point, I think that it's the scales are tipped more in the advisor favors than the client, but you just need to make sure that you're doing your due diligence and that the fee you're getting charged fits the scope of work that's being accomplished for you, and is helping you to achieve your ultimate goals and not presenting extra roadblocks that are going to set you back.
What are some of the challenges that you are running into in meeting with couples, and helping them navigate their finances?
Getting both parties to, again, get in alignment with one another. That would be the number one issue. One couple comes top of mind where they both knew that the lifestyle that they were currently living when I first met them wasn't sustainable. They had the income to sustain it, but they would never be able to get off the treadmill. They'd never be able to achieve anything other than the current lifestyle that they had. They would never be able to provide a financial legacy for their children. They would never be able to really clearly envision a level of retirement with the standard of living that they were currently setting for themselves. But a lot of that, and this gets back to what I first mentioned with getting women involved, the wife was a stay-at-home mom, and the husband wasn't equipped with the ability to clearly communicate to his wife what the lifestyle was costing them. And she was happy to kind of keep herself separate from that and, for use of a lesser term, bury her head in the sand on it and just live the lifestyle because it was enjoyable. But it came at a cost, and they weren't understanding how, they were bringing in almost $30,000 a month. And yet at the end of the month, they would have zero left in their bank account, and they didn't understand where it was going. So it was getting them to have a conversation where they would understand the struggle that each of them found. Him, as far as, feeling the need to stay on that treadmill and never be able to get off and constantly produce month in and month out to make sure that that was a sustainable income for the family. Her, as far as not necessarily being equipped with the skills to feel comfortable to set boundaries with him, with herself, with their children, as far as maybe needing to cut back at certain times so that they could put money aside for future goals. But it was just getting them to understand that both of them were afraid and fearful of the same things, but they were just seeing it from opposite sides of the coin and having an open conversation with one another. That's what many couples need to, or should be doing, is they also don't understand. And this, I heard this from another advisor. He's been a financial advisor for over 20 years. And only within the past year did he ever ask his wife what her first experience with money was, what her first memory was. But that's very telling for a person, because whatever your first memory was, some people it's, hearing their parents talk about it when they're 5. Other people, it's when they go off to camp and see other kids spending money at the commissary before lights out at night. But whatever their first memory is, it's very telling, because that is what they are basing all of their financial decisions off of. whether directly or indirectly, it impacts them. And it's something that, not knowing that about your spouse, not knowing where they're anchoring to, it's extremely important that you get clarity on that.
It sounds a lot like personal training. Like looking at what are all the foods you're eating, what's all the money you're spending right now, and how did you learn these habits, and that part where you said like you're holding them to the fire, right? And the personal trainer will push you to your physical, capabilities, and ultimately there's this upfront pain that has to happen to get to that long-term reward that you're looking for. So, we have the same thing in the work we do with couples. We have to have them do the work before they're going to feel the payoff. Does that
Yeah,
sound about right?
it's 100% correctly. And it's actually funny you mentioned that, because it's one of the goals that I made for myself this summer is, like other people do with finances. I made excuses once my wife and I started to have kids that I let my health get put on the back burner. I put on a couple extra pounds. I didn't work out quite the way I did, and I made every excuse under the sun. But I made a goal of myself to, focus on budgeting my caloric intake, get back to actually putting in the work to do the things that I wanted to do. Because I thought it was only prudent of me. I'm asking other people to budget other resources of theirs. I should be able to budget this aspect of my life as well a little bit better. But it is true. There's anything that's worth accomplishing is going to have a difficult threshold to get over. I'm not necessarily saying that you need to scrape by and, fast for 30 days to accomplish a savings goal that you want to. Um, but having difficult conversations is a bare minimum. I think that with that philosophical element, until you are actually able to put your thoughts into word with the other party and get it out there in the open, you're never going to make any headway. And that can be the hardest part, but it has to be the first part that you get out there and start working towards finding a mutual goal.
You had mentioned before we started recording that your firm can work throughout the entire 50 states. And,
Mhm.
so when someone is looking for a financial advisor, obviously there's a lot of people out there doing that kind of work. How does someone find the right person? What kinds of questions should a couple be asking a potential financial advisor so that they can find the right fit?
Yeah. I think part of it is what you mentioned. How do you get compensated? There's no right answer. My philosophical values align with, I think that I should only get better compensated the better that my clients do, the better that they're able to work towards their goals. That's my alignment. But other advisors do charge off of fees and commissions, where if you're only asking someone to do the trading for you, that might work for you. But it's important to understand the form of compensation that the advisor is getting first and foremost. Then once you understand that, then it's understanding, what are you going to be doing for me? There are advisors that charge more than others. We look to bring massive value with the fees that we charge at my firm. But the more the advisor charges, the more value I feel that they need to be bringing for you. If they're only doing investment management, I think that if you're charging anything over 0.5%, you're stealing from your clients. I think that once you're over that threshold, I think anything you do should be, um, the budgeting, tax planning, working on an estate plan with the clients. Um, Again, the big thing that I focus on heavily is families that want to have multi-generational wealth, and looking to have those conversations and setting up dynamics where the family's communicating with one another. The younger generation is equipped to have a better understanding of money earlier in life, whether that be through bringing the kids into the financial planning conversations earlier, whether that be through giving the the elder generation, whoever the primary client is, tools, resources, knowledges, conversation starters that they should be having with their loved ones. But again, the more holistic you get, again, that compensation is going to slide in alignment with that, but just looking for someone who aligns with the scope of work that you need for you and your family and your situation. But then I would also recommend, every advisor is supposed to be doing this when they're onboarding a client, but you can go on to the SEC's website or FINRA and look up every single advisor. Look at their history. Do they have any complaints against them? Do they have any marks against them as far as doing poor work? What designations do they have, and what do those designations stand for? What purpose do they serve? Myself, I've been putting it off. I think I may eventually go for it, but the CFP designation, it's something they originally started. Their first conference, the motto at that conference was mega selling. But now they're the gold standard as far as financial advisory practices. They've done very good at positioning themselves at that. And yes, they've evolved over time to kind of get away from that salesmanship and more towards fiduciary standards. But there's other designations that you might come across someone that has an alphabet soup after their last name, but when you actually look into it, it means nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Andrew, can you share with us and our audience a fun goal that you and your wife have, that's kind of in alignment with your financial goal?
Yeah, the fun goal that we have is getting our 2 kids to understand budgeting. Our son just turned 3 and our daughter's turning 6 next month. So we're not necessarily getting into the granular details yet about finding the right high yield savings account for it and the benefits of compound interest. But when they do small chores around the house, we'll reward them and compensate them for helping out. They both have small little ledgers that obviously our son will help him with writing it down, but getting him in the habit of that. Our daughter does a pretty good job at balancing out her ledger so she can see the inflows and outflows of cash. But that is kind of the fun goal that we have, believe it or not. It sounds a little nerdy, I know that, but again, I'm slightly biased with my approach to it. But it's equipping them to have an understanding that money is a tool and not something that they should be fearful of. It's also something I'm getting involved with a national coalition. Their North Carolina coalition, which is where I'm located, has been dormant for a while. And I'm trying to get it back up and running to promote financial literacy in the school system. But that's even the fun thing that my wife and I are doing. They're just helping to better educate our kids on finances. That's our primary goal, so that they don't have to have that burden in life.
That's fantastic. That's fun. So Andrew, can you tell us and our audience, where can someone learn more about you? How can they get in touch with you if they have any questions about their own finances?
Absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Andrew Van Alstyne. There's only one other Andrew Van Alstyne that I'm aware of in the country, so you can find me pretty easily. The easiest way to find out everything you need to know, though, is on my firm's website. So if you go to forfiduciary.com/meet Andrew Van Alstyne, I have a page that kind of lines out all of my philosophies, cash management, what my practice services entail. Then there's a link on there where you can book a time for us to chat. You can shoot me an email with any questions you may have. I'll be happy to respond back as soon as possible to help answer any of those questions for you. And the thing for me is to at least have the conversation. If we do talk, I may not be the perfect advisor for you. There's other advisors in my firm that have slightly different philosophical outlooks and different ways of managing their practice. And even if they're not a great fit for you, I can help point you in a direction. But I think that everyone should at least have a conversation with a neutral third party to make sure they're on solid financial footing.
Absolutely. But I think it's a really great resource for everyone out there that has questions about money. So Andrew, thank you so much for being on our podcast. This has been, very informative, and I think it's really going to help a lot of people out there.
Hey, Gene, I can't thank you enough for letting me come on here and have this discussion with you today.
Thank you. We want to thank all of you for joining us today on Couple Synergy. Our passion is in helping couples and people have happy and healthy relationships. And this podcast gives us a fun way of bringing our knowledge and expertise to you, our listeners. For all of you listening, please let us know how you enjoyed the show. If you have any questions, comments, or topic suggestions, please email us at contact@couplesynergy.com. For more information about Couple Synergy and our programs such as Relationship 101, the home study course, the next Couples Relationship Enhancement Weekend, and our premier couples coaching program called Couple to Couple, look us up online at couplesynergy.com.
And if you know someone who could benefit from this episode, please download it and share it. And thank you for listening.
Until next time, synergize your life and synergize your love.
You have been listening to Couple Synergy with Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. Couple Synergy was recorded, edited, and produced by Dr.